Khabib and Islam fanboys are the worst fanboys, even when you give some good criticism to Islam. Yeah, no, they just live vicariously through them because they don't have a life on their own. Most people in the West have their own lives going on, even if they are a bit NPC-ish. So they're not entirely living through another human. Yes, musical. I'm doing my own podcast. I'm not doing it with Jesse. I'm doing my own podcast. It'd be much better on my own, having more incorporation from the chat and more incorporation from chat members calling in, reading the live chat in the middle of the podcast. And I just don't think I could do that on a podcast with Jesse. So I'm going to be doing it on my own instead. I'm not doing it with Jesse. Although the money's good and it would have been good money, I think I'd have a much more successful podcast on my own, incorporating the chat. How did Jesse take it? He wanted me to do it. Like, obviously, he tried to convince me, but he just said, if this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing, and no hard feelings, all good on both ends. So me and Jesse are cool. It's not a personal thing against Jesse. It's just a personal thing against doing a collaboration podcast rather than doing my own podcast. So I want to do my own podcast. It's not a thing against Jesse. It's a thing against having another person. I want to do my own podcast, and I realized it after the podcast. I think I'd succeed more on my own. I think it'd be better on my own. I have 1,800 live viewers just on my own. Imagine if I had a production, a set, fans calling in, debates going on, Chael Sonnen in for a 10-minute segment if I get a good amount of viewership. You know what I mean? A fighter calling in for a 10-minute segment. No, it's not just these live streams. I want to have my own podcast. Eventually, I want to have my own podcast. Basically, like the podcast viewership. I don't know what that means. Yeah, true. Like our collaborated podcast had this many views at its peak. And I'm doing this on my own. You know? Can you trust fans calling in? I'd obviously vet the fans a little bit. I'm not going to just have them scream the M-word. But, yeah. Wrecking the game, Guru, indeed.